In the moment that you're diagnosing an ayahuasca, nature of the perception is a combination of all of your senses. And it's as if you can see into the body of the person. You see into their morphogenetic field. You see into the energy, but you have this intelligence with you. It's not your own intelligence. And you can ask it directly what it is that somebody is experiencing or why they're experiencing that. And then once you have the answer, I mean, it's as simple as reading a scan or a chart or anything else.
Hello, welcome to the podcast Telar Maestro. I'm Emmanuel Ayala. I'm the host of the podcast. Today I have Hamilton Soter, and I would like you, Hamilton, to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Hamilton Souther. I'm a visionary leader and master mystic and shaman, as well as a CEO and businessman. And I've been living in the Amazon, practicing the mystic arts and the medicinal arts of the Amazonian forest for the last 22 years. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm super interesting in your journey because you come from the US and then you uh, basically decided to take into this journey to become a shaman. And can you tell me a little bit about this journey?
Sure. First, I studied anthropology in high school and in the university. It was my major. And so I was interested in indigenous cultures and other ways of life, as well as deep history. So I was interested in paleoanthropology, as well as cultural anthropology of today, the living cultures. And I made a kind of a unique decision at that time in anthropology to be really interested in studying the world today through an anthropological lens. So the whole world, not just this one culture or tribe, or not just the deep history. And in my early 20s, I had a very strong awakening in my consciousness. And through that awakening, I was guided by visions to the Amazon and to ultimately my teachers. And so I followed that path, and it led me to a traditional shamanic apprenticeship. I was one of the first people outside of the lineages to ever be allowed in to actually study. And I was taken into the healing arts and healing practices of the Amazon rainforest in a variety of disciplines. So I became a médico vegetalista, or a doctor of plant medicine, and of ayahuasca, of the medicinal trees, the sanango plants, Toei and Mapacho tobacco in the visionary arts, and a variety of other kinds of medicinal plants for the treatment of colds and flus, different kinds of antibacterial, antiviral plants, different kind of poultices and tinctures for what you would think of as kind of like more traditional or more classic forms of illness.
I'm interested in this perception of the cultures in the indigenous communities about medicine, because as far as I know, medicine and for you as well as you have trained is not only something that it has to do with the body and and when I did ayahuasca also the shaman, I don't know if I should call it shaman because shaman is, I guess, is a more a word that's been used now, but I guess vegetalista is the right word to use. Um, but I think, I guess, the audiences usually understand shaman in a broader sense.
Sure.
Um, um, but I'm interested in this vision of the world about illness. What is the vision of the people in the Amazon and from these cultures about illnesses?
Well, the general concept is that when you have illness, they have a really simple term for it. They call it mal, and it just means you have bad or you have something wrong. They go, oh, I'm mal. And mal is a broad term to represent lots of different kinds of affliction. And you have to look at the body, and you can scientifically, as all the cells or the systems, like the organal system, circulatory system, brain, nervous system, etc. You can look at it from that perspective. But you can also start to break the body down into the component elements of it. So you can see it as a field of molecules and a field of atoms and a field of subatomic particles and a field of quantum quarks. And as you get deeper into the body, it becomes more abstract what this mal is. And so the mal could be bacteria, but seen in their subatomic particles and in their electrons, it could be a kind of energy. And the mal could be seen as it gets into the quantum, like a morphogenetic field that you would see in ayahuasca visions, like uh, dimensional sacred geometry, within it patterns that represent illness or disease. And so I think in the mythological context, the way it's normally spoken about, it's told in the form of stories as bad spirit. But the problem in understanding, just like the word shaman and vegetalista, is that the term spirit for an Amazonian vegetalista means something different to like ghost or phantasm. That would be the concept from the Westerner. The spirit is a kind of energy, a pattern of energy that's repeatable and can be identified and diagnosed and understood with great precision as a cause of illness. And so when they say bad spirit, they don't mean like mythological demonic creature. They mean like pattern in your morphogenetic field that represents the origin of this illness. And if you can recode it, repattern it, remove it, replace it with another pattern, then the person, quote, magically gets healed. You watch their body now generate health. And it's a very sophisticated form of healing technology. It really is a technology that the indigenous people discovered, and it's incredibly sophisticated. Even though the traditional mechanisms from the outside observer looks like ceremony or gets expressed in the form of a mythology. And so illness is a root cause of a kind of pattern of energy within you, whether that pattern of energy was viral, whether that pattern of energy was bacterial, whether that pattern of energy is an autoimmune condition, the pattern of energy is some kind of structural break within the body, like a sprain or a broken bone. It would be seen through that lens.
That's super interesting. So how this knowledge was developed, like because I imagine, like you say, I think it's a technology because this or how this the vegetalista diagnose or understand someone who is ill, for example.
Since there isn't a written history, there's only an oral history amongst these traditions. And so you have to go to the oral history, but interpret them in a way that's logical because they're told in a great mythology. They're told in an origin story. And the origin story around the discovery of the medicines goes back in time, generation by generation by generation, to a time when there was no longer the understanding or notion or the notion of separation hadn't been created yet. And humans, plants, and animals all lived together in a form of union. And it's said that there was a common language at that time, that there was an ability for humans, other animals, and plants to all communicate with each other. And I don't think it means speak. I don't think it means use words. I think that's something that came later in history. And so they're talking about, I think, when humans were tapped into what we call consciousness, and that they were able to understand through a kind of energetic communication the uses of plants, the purpose of them, the combination of them, along with a lot of trial and error. So I think the populations at that time were just much more connected and interconnected. And at the same time, trying things and following intuition and little by little discovering the use of these plants, both through the really miraculous experience of feeling like you're told directly what to do by nature and able to do it and have it have the effect that you thought, and probably times where it didn't have the effect and people got it wrong, and they learned from that kind of experimentation. But I think what's important is that there was an understanding of a time where there is this union between the life forces of the forest, and they weren't seen as all of these separate elements.
Yeah, that's something that I find also interesting that I have not much experience with plant medicines, but the experience I had is that when I was under the influence of these medicines, my mind started thinking a different pattern of thought. And I mean, I wonder if this is what about, because for someone as me, I grew up as a Westerner as well, like in the Western culture. Even though I'm from Ecuador, I grew up like also under this umbrella of experiences of the looking to Europe, to the US, and also for in the paradigm of pharmaceutical medicine. So, and also in not only pharmaceutical medicine, but also psychology. So when I encounter and I experience, for example, with tobacco, I realized I started enter this pattern of my mind that I didn't know I could enter. Like, and so I wonder if that's what you mean when you said that this is the spirit of the medicine and all the technology that allows you to basically perceive the world in a different way.
I think certainly when people drink ayahuasca, there's now a lot of anecdotal evidence of people drinking ayahuasca and participating in ceremonies from cultures all around the world and having a universal experience that's transcendent of the Western cultural influence that they're under. So I think that's at least a starting point where we could say, okay, there's something common here amongst anybody, Homo sapien, coming and drinking ayahuasca. Um, there's also commonality in the visions that they have, not so much in the individual narrative, but in the what we call the morphogenetic field or the visionary landscape, often by the Shipibo tribe, drawn out in very intricate sacred geometry or very intricate geometric patterns. That most people, if you ask them if they drank ayahuasca, if they saw at some point what looked like reality to them become geometric and patterned, they would all say yes in some form or another. Um, they also experience a breakdown of the individuality of their mind. So, this little mind bubble they live in, that they bounce around in, and that they're very strong in their ego in, that represents themselves, they feel a breakdown of that, and they feel their senses become heightened and become heightened aware of their senses, and that their senses pick up a lot more information and they're able to process a lot more information. And so I think if we look at those qualities of experience, we can start to see that there is something to this idea of a collective. And I would like to think of the Western way as an approach, like the Western mechanism, the entirety of the Western culture is that's a great collective, now multi-billion person collective approach to how to address life, health, family, community, society, government, economy, rule, justice, um, redemption, experience while we're alive, and even the rituals and understandings around death. So to me, that just represents culture, a really now massive culture. And in that culture, there's this idea of being more advanced or, leading in a certain kind of way. But I think that's a quality of that culture. It's not truth of the culture itself. And so, when we get enculturated to the Western framework, it's represented in a concept of separation, that I'm separate from you, I'm individualized, 30 kids in a classroom, separated from each other, individualized, each one with a matrix of statistics that relate to them, and that kind of framework represents a logic and reason and understanding. And it's a very potent one, but it's not the only one. And when I went to the Amazon and I first participated in ayahuasca ceremonies and spoke with the vegetalistas, the maestros, after the ceremony, I had my first real discovery, which was that they had a completely different mind than the mind I had. And it let me understand not only are there two, three, four different kinds of mind, the mind actually has a core structure or kind of architecture associated with it. Just like software has an architecture or a building has an architecture, the mind has an architecture. And I realized they had a different architecture. And in realizing that, I understood that the Western version was not the only version. And in other versions, people could be capable of things that were impossible in the Western version.
Yeah, that's also something that I noticed with my experience with ayahuasca and the vegetalista I stay with. I think it was for me difficult to ask the answers or get the information I tried to get because I was trying to understand. I'm still trying to understand everything from this Western world perspective. And he was using words like going to the light and being clean. And only when I had the experience of ayahuasca, I thought, oh, so okay, now I understand what he means. It's because maybe I was expecting a more complex answer to what I would experience with these plants. But as far as I understand, I guess is the role of the vegetalista is mostly guide the person who is interacting with these plants, or maybe maybe I don't know much about this. So I also would like to understand what is the relationship between the vegetalista and the plants and the patient or the person who want to experience these plants medicines.
Yeah, the core role of the vegetalista is to function, as you said, as guide, but they're also a bridge between the plants, and they're also like an ambassador or a diplomat for these different realms of consciousness and understanding. So the vegetalista is functioning as a guide to the ceremony itself. They also have the knowledge of how to prepare the plants and ensure the safety of the participants. And then they have a connection, a very deep connection to what they call the spirit world, which I think of as this great field of energy and or great field of consciousness. And they have relationships and allyships formed within that great field. And it goes well beyond that of just kind of your normal thinking of Earth. The Earth is a, a locus or a point within it through which great connection can be made. So they are sitting there in this like nexus of connection and can connect with the plants or connect with the animals or connect with other star systems or connect with the interdimensionality of the universe, etc. And really their role is based on what they know. So the vegetalista that is just a guide, all they can do is guide. The vegetalista that is a guide and a healer can perform healing. The one that has been turned into a médico, a true médico, will be able to perform healing through their spirit and through their own energy. The ones that are warriors battle and fight for the well-being of the individuals, depending on the kind of afflictions or illnesses that they have. And so there are different roles based on the nature of the lineage and the training, but all of them serve as a form of guide. But they're not psychologists, so they're not there to deconstruct your psyche. They say the plant will do that for you. You will have that experience with the plant, and they give you core guidance like go to the light. And it doesn't make sense until you drink, and then you realize there's a big difference in energy between the light and the dark. And the light will guide you to healing, and the darkness will take you into greater distress or potentially even psychosis.
Yeah, I think also maybe I guess that in a way I think that I was trying to make a parallel between psychology and also plant medicines, how they work for the mind. And I was trying to do that because I'm still trying to understand how this works. And these induced states, I guess, are not only mind states, because, for example, for ayahuasca, you also had a certain point you had to not I don't know if everybody, but in my experience was I had to vomit, and it didn't feel like it was like it was. I felt like it was a minimal for vomiting. It was okay. I need to vomit because this is not necessary for me anymore. And I mean, when you see it from outside perspective, vomiting for some people seems like an unpleasant experience. But if you, with the new research about how the gut biome is composed, for me, it makes sense that what is in your gut and what is transforming your gut also affect your whole body and so also affect your mind. And I guess I'm trying. Maybe I'm still trying to make sense from this scientific point of view. But yeah, I think for me that's the part that is really interesting because I think I'm happy that it's been researched lately more about these plant medicines.
The purge is purposeful. And the nature of the purging, whether it's vomiting or defecating, can also come out sweating, breathing, yawning, tearing. There's a number of ways that this comes out. But when it comes out physically, when you vomit or when you defecate, and you're releasing what they call mal. And it's really hard for someone to understand because typically people think they are throwing up because they're sick or something's wrong with them. But in this case, it's an actual expulsion from our body. And there are many other animals that have that experience, that expel things that are not good for them anymore and come out of them. And I think that we're just not used to that. So when it happens to us, we have a story about it that we're trying to put together and make sense of and relate. But it's actually a phenomena. And I've watched many people, it's very hard to believe, but I've watched now hundreds of people have depression, have trauma, have past difficulties from abuse kinds of traumas, that are really trying to get over it, and all of a sudden they'll need to go to the toilet. They go to the toilet, they purge, and they come back with a different mind. So you're talking about the gut biome and what the gut's processing, and the nature of this medicine to be able to go into the gut, make a fundamental change, have an expulsion, a release, and then come back with a different cognitive state that persists after the ceremony as a fundamental change and a fundamental healing is actually miraculous. That you could go into a bathroom on a plant medicine with depression and come back treated and healed and able to move on with your life with a new state of mind and a new state of feeling and emotion. And so it's actually purposeful to the healing journey. And when I practice, I let people know that it's only has to happen when necessary. So it's not you drink this plant and this plant makes you throw up. Many people don't throw up. It's not you drink this plant and you have diarrhea. Many people don't. It only happens to you if you have mal and you need that mal to come out. And so I think that
Oh
that's a
wow.
really powerful technique and tool for healing, to be able to create that release for somebody that otherwise there's no known way to be able to draw that mal out of their body and have it be released. And so it's a miraculous form of healing and something to be deeply embraced, but only when necessary. And afterwards, you're better off for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you elaborate a little bit more about mal? I what I understand from mal is I heard some also vegetalistas talk about it in another podcast or documentary, and they were also calling that susto. I don't know if it's the same, um, because susto maybe is, from my perspective, would be more related to trauma. But can you elaborate a little bit more about it?
Yeah, there's different kinds of mal. So once you have a broad generalization like illness, there's all different kinds. And what they call susto is the precursor to what we would think of as a post traumatic stress response. It's what happens in the moment of the trauma or the stress itself. It's like a great fright or a great overwhelm to your organism, to yourself. So your senses get overwhelmed. It could be through a kind of accident or a kind of assault or a great shock or fright that happens to you. And that moment, that is called the susto. And there are different ways of describing what happens to you after that. And the nature of the medicine is to diagnose that, okay, someone has experienced susto. The most recent one I saw was a lady was coming out of the bathroom and a big dog jumped on her, didn't attack her, but jumped on her, and she just fell to the ground. And the moment of the big dog scared her so much that her heart was racing and she had a big adrenaline response. And the next she felt dizzy, and the next day she just didn't feel right. Like she felt off. And so you say, okay, that's susto. And then there's a treatment for that susto, and that's a kind of mal. And in that state, they say you're susceptible. It's like a weakened state. You're susceptible to other kinds of mal, other vibrational states, other people's negativities, other people's kinds of abuses, etc. And so there's an intervention to treat susto, typically right after it. And just to share a little more, when I first came to the Amazon, one of the things I realized was that the people I lived out with in the forest didn't have words for depression, anxiety, or stress. And I realized that was because they treated susto before susto became those kinds of illnesses. So if somebody has like a really bad day and then they have a really bad day, they get treated instead of somebody having a really bad day after a really bad day for years and turning into some kind of really terrible depression. They treat it, they truncate, they cut the problem, and they give immediate intervention and solve the problem before it becomes this habituated state. And they do it for people of all ages. And so I also found that to be a very sophisticated form of social healing, a recognition of a need within an individual, and a mechanism to intervene and provide healing for the person. And then once you heal the susto, a person just moves on without carrying the trauma.
Well, that's super interesting. Um, so, but this is unique of cultures in the Amazon, or it was something that was part of the history of the European maybe tribes and also other tribes around the world that has been gone because of industrialization.
There's evidence and understandings from other tribes that go from South America through Central America to North America that have very similar concepts of susto. In the Native American tribes in North America, they have a notion of treating susto with what they call soul retrieval. So there are different techniques that are used, but the same diagnosis of mal, the same kind of recognition that something has happened and there needs to be an intervention. And then across Asia and into Eurasia, I know that there are also similar kinds of patterns. So I think that we can see in individualized tribes that still exist around the world that there's a recognition of this as a kind of collective understanding. They're not identical, but it's similar. And then, you see with this Western industrialized culture that's formed and the spread of it, the disappearance of these understandings. And even here where I live in the Amazon, in the city, where there's 500,000 people who live in the city, they don't believe in these practices or understandings anymore. It's not part of their cultural awareness. And only when they need it, so it's now reversed. It's only when they need it. They first go to a hospital, then they go to a psychologist, then they go to a trauma psychologist, and nothing's working. They finally, at the very end of that, go to the vegetalista, and the vegetalista knows how to cure them. And then it's almost like they get reawakened to their culture. They get reawakened to this great power that their culture holds that is no longer part of the education system, that's no longer part of their cultural identity. And then they become a big proponent of that aspect of their culture. And then, they say, oh yeah, the vegetalista is the one who saved me. The vegetalista is the one that cured me, et cetera. And so the exact opposite, if you're deep in the forest, you go to the vegetalista. If that doesn't work, you go to the next vegetalista. If that doesn't work, you go to the poste medico, the medical post, like the tiny little kind of sub hospital. If that doesn't work, you work your way to the
Yeah.
cities, to the big hospitals.
And what is your perception about modern medicine compared to the practice of and ancient traditional medicines? Is there still a use for it, or there is can be a symbiosis for both?
Yeah, for me, medicine is medicine. So the key to understanding medicine is the understanding that all medicine are practices, substances, and understandings, knowledge that help heal us. And then we come into the picture and create Western medicine and traditional medicine. Where did Western medicine come from? It was birthed out of traditional medicine. That was the only medicine before Western medicine. There was traditional medicine. So if you have like a tree of life and branches of evolution, you have medicine, and then you have traditional medicines and plant medicines, and then you have a divergence. You have a course where these continue the ancestral ways and these become the scientific
Yeah.
ways. And now we look at them as if they're opposite. We need to go back to where they're united and bring that understanding. We as a global culture need medicine. We understand that. We have illness,
Yes.
we have disease. We need medicine. So I see it as medicine. And now you have to ask yourself from the same scientific lens, what works best? The role of a doctor is to diagnose the problem and give you the treatment that's the correct treatment. And that's your true role. As a vegetalista, the very first thing I was taught in diagnosis is this patient and is this illness to be treated in the hospital direction, what would be called Western medicine, or is this person to be treated in the traditional medicine? And that was the first point of understanding. Now, what's really interesting about that is that the vegetalistas taught me that how you make that diagnosis is with what they call spirit. That spirit will tell you and tell you correctly which direction the person's supposed to go. So I can tell you a story about that. I had a person come to me.
Yeah.
I had a person come to me that could not walk. And I was told that they had been attacked by witch doctors and hechiceros, sorcerers. And there's this great story about what had happened to them of why they couldn't walk. And they came to me as a healer of those kinds of illnesses to see if I could be the person to help save this person. And so we brought them into our ceremonial center, and I lay them down, and I went into an ayahuasca ceremony that night to diagnose them. And I went to them and I looked at them, and what I saw was that they had an abscess in their femoral head, that where the
Oh,
femur was in the acetabulum, that there was now an abscess infection inside the femoral head. And it was very clear to me that that was the problem. And so I said to him, you have an infection inside your hip. You need to go to the hospital. And so he didn't have any money to go to the hospital. So I gave him the money to go to the hospital. And sure enough, they did a CAT scan on him, and they found that he had an abscess in his femoral head. They did surgery. They were able to remove the infected tissue, and they were able to heal him. And I saw him a number of years later with his leg able to walk. And that's an example of diagnosing when you need Western medicine.
yeah. I also super curious about the perception you had when you are on the influence of ayahuasca, because maybe many people don't know, but I read, I seen is that the good vegetalista will take ayahuasca with you. So, but I if you said that you could see this infection in the tooth, what is your perception in this moment? Can you describe this perception you had?
Yeah, you in the moment that you're diagnosing an ayahuasca, the nature of the perception is a combination of all of your senses. And you have a vision, and it's a very interesting state of consciousness because you can see the same thing with your eyes open or closed. So you're in a completely stable, lucid, visionary state, and you can have your eyes closed or open, and you see exactly the same thing. And it's as if you can see into the body of the person. You see into their morphogenetic field. You see into the energy that's represented. And so you have that visual context, and then you have this communication with this greater intelligence. And some people say the greater intelligence comes from the plants. Some people say it comes from the universe. But you have this intelligence with you. It's not your own intelligence. It's an external form of intelligence, and you can ask it directly what it is that somebody is experiencing or why they're experiencing that, and you can receive information from it. And then once you have the answer, I mean, it's as simple as reading a scan or a chart or anything else. Once you develop that skill.
Well, yeah. When I was under the influence of this medicine, I also become aware of this influence. It's complex to talk about it to someone who hasn't experienced, because it's. I mean, at the moment I experience, it's just like I used to be Catholic. I became atheist, and then I became agnostic because I didn't thought it didn't make sense. And but when I was under this state, it was like, okay, this is something else. There is a force going through everything. It's just that I couldn't see it before. Like, and it seems that this is what everybody is referring to when they are calling sometimes bigger force or God or something else. And yeah, it's like at that point, I mean, for me, it's difficult to put into words what is this presence. And for me, the also interesting part is, as you said, a lot of people or people who go to these ayahuasca sessions also have the same experience, and it seems to be. And also for me, it was a feminine experience, and I think it's a feminine force. If it felt like that. Um, yeah, and yeah, can you tell me a little bit about it?
There are many forces. Those are called the spirits. And some are male, some are female in their nature, some are masculine and feminine, some are neutral, some are transcendent of gender, some are much very universal in their nature, and some are very specific. And until you have the experience of them, it's as if they don't exist. But I don't think that's any different than not knowing about a phone app that exists and it's right there to download and you don't know it. Or this other kind of food that exists that you've never heard of and people have been eating it for thousands of years. So I don't think it's any different than that. I think it's just out of our field of awareness. And we have to accept that one of our great hubrises from the Western society is to think we know more than we know or be convinced that we know more than we actually know. And the truth is, we don't know more. We only know as much as we know. And often there are things outside of our worldview or our understanding that do exist. And it turns out that in the world of the vegetalistas, that there is this greater expression of consciousness that people tap into when they have these experiences. And the vegetalistas have known about this for thousands of years. They've known about this for longer than the existence of Christianity. They've known about this longer than the existence of Islam and Judaism. They've known about it longer than the origins of Buddhism. So the great religions of today are younger than this knowledge about this great presence and this great force. So it's been given many, many words and many names. But the existence of that is indisputable. It's a fact, and it's an ancestral knowledge that we carry as human beings for tens of thousands of years of understanding. And out of that understanding have come our great religions. And now it's the opposite. People are rebelling against the religions. They're denying the teachings of the religions, and they're trying to discover if there's some truth to any of it beyond the nature of the religions. But that's rebelling against an institution and its teachings, not rebelling against the core fundamental spirit or core fundamental divinity or core fundamental God that represents the universe itself. So I think that the world has religions because there is a truth to God or there is a truth to spirit before there ever was a word for it, before there ever was a concept of it, before there ever was an awareness. And the awareness is born of it. And then from that, our Homo sapien, our human religions get formed, our human spiritualities get formed, our human religious cultures get formed. And then out of that, these institutions get formed. And so really what people are doing is just saying, I don't believe in the rituals and the symbolism and the stories associated with this religion. And because of that, there's like I say, a kind of rebellion. But people can't deny the nature of their own origin, and they can't deny the importance of these universal forces.
Yeah, I also wonder if there is some truth about something I read from this book called Teaching of Don Juan. And he was talking, I mean, he's basically described as a shaman who is teaching to apprentice who is an also, as far as I know, I think it's archaeologist or something related in this field of understanding culture. And he was telling that for people who don't hasn't experienced this or are not aware of this spiritual world, is being immersed in their daily lives was like a protection from this. Uh, so I wonder if there is something about it, like, okay, yeah, I don't believe about it, but also that protects me of the complexity of this.
As soon as you tap into other, right? If you're in your bubble and that's your awareness and you tap into other, you transcend the bubble, you have no idea how much other there is. And you don't know how big your bubble is. So when you start, you're in your bubble. They call it your luminous egg. You're within your luminous egg. And then as soon as you step outside of that, you don't have any idea how big the other really is. And I think that's what they're referring to.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say the luminous egg, because I had this experience with the ayahuasca, the first ceremony I did. That at the end of the ceremony, Ramon, who was the vegetalista who was working with me, he started chanting, and I I remember I could visualize myself seeing like there I was inside an egg that I was cracking open, and it feels like there was like a bird coming out, and also the chanting feels like it was a bird chanting. And also, I don't know if the what is the role of the chanting also of the and also the movement of these leaves, because for me it felt like it didn't it's transformed in the moment into something more like more animal like. It was not only leaves were feathers,
Hmm.
and also, yeah, I for me this seems to be, I mean, for me it's like also a kind of technology as you describe, because it's something that was happening around, it was being guided in the moment. And what I really find also fascinating about this is limpia has been known in Latin America, at least in Ecuador, for many years, like, and people, but I think lately it's being said in a more, or even use this term of limpia in a way that is more like, oh, you have a bad luck. But when I went there and say, okay, I will perform the limpia, then it became, okay, this is something deeper and older than I thought it was. And yeah, but I don't know if you can elaborate about it.
Chanting in the sacred plant ceremony is a core tool to transform your consciousness. And the leaves are the shakapa. They make a shk sound. Shk, 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 shk. And in that, it's a very subtle transformation through sound waves, through sound vibration of the state that everybody shares in the ceremony. And in doing so, it awakens other states of consciousness and it awakens other mental and emotional and imaginary states. And then through that field is what's happening when they call the spirit. And in your case, those are birds. It could be what's called bird medicine or the bird spirits. And the shaman could be working with the birds at that time, invoking them, and the chants can sound like bird songs and they can come from the birds. And they'll wield what's called bird medicine. And bird medicine can perform all different kinds of healing when needed. Um, and so you see what were leaves become feathers, and the feathers, animals can fly out of you and or come into you and become part of you. And in doing so, their attributes or their essences can transform you and bring healing. And it's a very common kind of medicine. It's a very common state. So, it's shared amongst all. And so I'm really glad that you were able to have that experience. The idea of a limpia is a cleansing. And so what you're doing with cleansing is cleansing out mal. Right now, the real traditional knowledge is secret, so it's not really shared what that is. So typically it's described in very general terms. So like, oh, you have bad luck. We're going to heal you of that. Oh, you've had these things happen. We're going to heal you of that. And inside it, it's actually very sophisticated what it is that's taking place. And so culturally, it's become very simplistic. It's like, oh, you have bad luck. They have a concept called saladera. You have like this salted thing that's happened to you. It's just salty. Everything's going. bad,
Yeah.
you need to fix that, you need a limpia, etc. But really what's happening is a great transfer of energy and spirit, and it's changing you at a fundamental level. And if you're using bird medicine for that, they'll often use the what they call the waira. The waira is the air medicine. And so in the limpia, they bring waira, they bring the air, and through that they can share this energy, this spirit with you, and you can perceive the different animals through that.
Yeah, that's yeah. It's fascinating for me how complex this world seems to be. And another thing that I was is also part of the popular culture in Latin America, and this is something that is still being used for family members from me. My sister told me about it, that she still uses these eggs for limpia, but they use it traditionally. And I saw my grandmother to do it, And when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about anything, but I was surprised that my sister still uses it today, and she said that it has worked. And I didn't know what to make about it, but when I was in the Amazon with the vegetalista, he also used this egg for diagnosing, and as someone who was there as well in this retreat. So for me, I mean, can you talk a little bit about the egg, because this is something people still use, and this is something for me is great, or for me fascinating in both ways.
Yeah, they call it pasar el huevo. It's to take the egg and
Yeah.
bring it over the body. They put it over the body in different patterns and around the body, and it's supposed to absorb the mal. And it's a transference of this certain kind of energy pattern from you to the mal, and in doing, or the mal to the egg, and then in doing so you are liberated from it. So it's almost like a magnet, like, or a sponge. It's drawing it out of you. And then in some cases the vegetalistas, or the curanderos, the healers, know how to open the egg, and in doing so diagnose with it. They can see exactly what is wrong with you and what kind of problems you have or illnesses you have, based on what they can read, like a kind of divination in the egg itself. And in some cases it's just used to cleanse you and provide a certain kind of healing, and it just has to do with this idea of transfer of energy.
Yeah, that's that's pretty amazing. I mean, for me, it would be cool to experience more of this state of mind. I wonder if this state of minds of consciousness also can be achieved without the use of plant medicines, or is it is the vegetalista or part of the tools of the vegetalistas use plant medicines to enter in these states?
There are many ways of going into altered states of consciousness. I think that what's common is the idea of going into an altered state. But what's important to understand is the way you go into an altered state changes the altered state that you go into. So, a meditator who goes into an altered state cannot access the states of consciousness that you do through ayahuasca. And the states of consciousness you access through ayahuasca are not the same as the ones through psilocybin mushrooms, and they're not the same that you access through breath work. And so I just think of it as like different paths that you can take to share and go into the nature of an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And regarding culture, I seen a pattern of phenomena happening around the world, like, and for me, it has to do with beauty, because I'm an artist, and I see that globalization. I mean, it was this promise of everybody will be able to understand each other, and everybody will be able to, in a way, collaborate with each other. But in that same vein, for me, it has happened that it's become more homogeneous everything, and culture has been started to be erased little by little, until we have uh, signs of that in buildings, in architecture, and also the way people lives is more atomized. Everything is more atomized. Medicine is more atomized. Everything is more okay. How I can extract the minimum, the small particle to treat something, and I wonder if what is the future of culture, and if culture if really have to work, had to go back to these roots of because I mean culture is complex now, and how can we go back to the root, or if there is makes sense for the future to go back to these roots?
Well, the cultural complexity question is one of evolution, that our cultures have evolved and we have to accept that. And we want to preserve certain aspects of our culture that have great meaning and also allow the evolution. But I think what we want to be careful for is the homogenization of culture. And we don't want to have only one architecture and one kind of schooling and one kind of understanding, because the great differences that we all represent is what's rich about humanity, not making humanity all the same. So we want to allow culture to represent this great richness for all of us, not some kind of you know similarity and only the same. We want to transcend that and just maintain this rich difference around the world.
Yeah, I'm also was a little bit. I mean, as you said, a little bit sad that Ramon, the vegetalista I was with, he told me that the people from his community didn't want to become vegetalista because they didn't want to get into this arduous training. As far as I know, it's several years you have to train with sometimes fasting, sometimes also uh, you have to abstain yourself from sexual encounters. And but also at the same time, he told me that people from Europe are interested in training. So yeah, I guess I wonder if this change of culture also it's been passed to it's been mutating, as you say, changing so these traditions are being kept not for the same people of the community, but for people from who are more interested from other countries.
When I came to the Amazon, the traditional cultures were dying to the pressure of westernization, and earbuds and little MP3 players and music and cold drinks and little bits of sugar were what were cool and popular, and the plants no longer were, and the great traditions no longer were. And it required Western influence to actually re-stimulate this idea that what the indigenous people had and what they were teaching and learning amongst each other was actually still of great value. And so I think that just represents the notion of when cultures ultimately change. And what I hope is that people of the right heart and the right spirit are the ones that want to continue to share this culture, as there's a cross-cultural exchange that's taking place now.
Yeah, I mean, also I think this is super important. I think important for the future of and the health of people, because I think fragmentation in a community is definitely bad for health of people. Can you tell me more about your projects? Your what are you working on right now? What are the plans for the future?
We have a number of projects. The first one is Blue Morpho, and Blue Morpho has been operational for the last 20 years. And we are both a retreat center and facility in the Amazon, here in the Peruvian Amazon, outside of Iquitos. So we're a healing center here, and we also have an academy, and we teach certification courses and programs, and we teach also a mystery school. And so people can come and be a part of our mystery school from all over the world. We have hundreds of people from all over the world in our program, learning about everything that we've been talking about.
So, where people can find you if they want to know more about you and your projects?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. You can come and find us at bluemorphotours.com, bluemorphoacademy.com, and godai.ai, where we have an AI assistant that we've created that is different kinds of spiritual leaders that can answer all your spiritual questions for you. We even have shamans and priestesses and different kinds of spiritual AI assistants. And we're also going to be launching a project very soon called Full Stock. So check out all of those projects.
Thank you very much, Hamilton, for your time. I know you're busy. Yeah, once again, I'm happy that was able to talk with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Emmanuel. It's been a pleasure to be here on the podcast with you. And I look forward to more conversations. It's been a very deep and enriching conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Yeah, for sure. I would be happy to have another podcast in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Okay, you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with more people. This will help the community of Telar Maestro to continue growing.